have here the Vivo X Flip, Vivo's first clamshell-style foldable phone. These flip phones seem to be gaining in popularity, so it makes sense for Vivo to jump on board, but is it actually competitive? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our Vivo X Flip review. The Vivo X Flip is a folding smartphone in the same vein as Samsung's Galaxy Z Flip 4 or Motorola's Razr 40 Ultra. But for their first flip phone, Vivo is starting off with a China-only release. The main reason to check it out is to see what Vivo has to offer. We could see more like this globally in the near future. Probably the most unique feature on the X Flip is the Zeiss branded camera setup. But another thing it has going for it is a relatively large cover display. It's not huge like on the Razr 40 Ultra, but it's still bigger than some competitors. The design of the X Flip is also quite flashy. Ours is in the silk gold colorway, and the glossy metallic sheen really catches the eye. The aluminum frame is glossy too, and matches the color. The phone overall feels smooth and premium. The hinge here is pretty nice. It seems quite smooth and stable, and it will stay open at different angles, which lets you use the phone as a sort of tripod to stabilize the cameras. And when folded, the X Flip closes completely flush, with no gap between the two halves of the phone. One thing missing from this design though is IP-rated ingress protection, unlike Samsung's flip phone. And unlike Moto, who really tried to achieve a similar quality between the inner and outer displays, here the focus is clearly on the inner one. It's a 6.74-inch foldable LTPO AMOLED with a 1080p resolution and an adaptive 120Hz refresh rate. You get a lot of goodies here, like a cinematic 21:9 aspect ratio, 10-bit color, and HDR10+ video. The color accuracy can be excellent too, based on your color settings. The crease where the display folds over is also quite subtle, and relatively smooth to the touch. This display is also quite bright. We measured a little over 600 nits when adjusting the brightness manually, and this can boost to over 1000 nits with adaptive brightness. And as an LTPO panel, you get a smooth 120Hz when swiping around, and that can dial down as low as 1 Hz when you're idling to save that extra bit of energy. Keep in mind that minimum value requires a higher level of screen brightness. So how about the cover display? It's a 3-inch OLED, and it isn't as sharp as the main one, with a pixel density of just 267 ppi, and it has a standard 60Hz refresh rate. There's normally no always-on display functionality here. It's more like a peak display that'll turn off after a few seconds. That's unless you put the phone into tent position. This enables a calendar mode AOD, which shows you the time and date. The lock screen here is quite customizable with different styles to choose from. These can include clocks, widgets, and buttons. There's also an option for a lock screen pet with some pretty cute designs. You get support for a few simpler apps here on the cover screen. The selection isn't huge, with things like a timer, voice recorder, an exercise tracker, the phone app, and the camera app. Things like that. Due to the limited selection of apps that can be shown on it, we couldn't properly test the cover screen's max brightness, but it seems bright enough. There are notification cards if you swipe down from the corner, but you can't really interact with most of them. The phone prompts you to open up to the inner screen to continue. And swiping down anywhere else here brings up some simple quick toggles. These include brightness, do not disturb, Wi-Fi, and the flashlight. And besides that, you have the camera-specific functions of the cover screen. It can show a preview to your subject while you're shooting them. And you can also use it as a viewfinder in order to take selfies with the rear cameras. Overall, the X Flip's cover display is neat and does pack plenty of features, but after seeing what's possible on the cover screen of Moto's flip phone, this one does feel a bit behind. Other than that, the user interface here is the Chinese UI from Vivo, called Origin OS, which runs on top of Android 13. For the most part, it's similar to Vivo's global FunTouch OS, but there are some differences in functionality here and there, and of course, many apps are in Chinese. You can get the Vivo X Flip with 256 or 512 gigs of storage, and that isn't expandable through microSD. And there's a side-mounted fingerprint reader for biometrics, which is pretty standard for these sorts of phones. But one thing which isn't standard, and a little disappointing actually, is the speaker setup. Unlike the other flip phones out there, the X Flip has just a single speaker. Its loudness is just average, but at least the sound quality isn't that bad, with pleasant sounding vocals and highs. If you'd like to hear for yourself and compare to other devices, you can check out the link up at the top or in the video description. The chipset of the Vivo X Flip is the same as you'd get on the Galaxy Z Flip 4 or the Moto Razr 40 Ultra. It's a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, last year's flagship silicon from Qualcomm. It packs plenty of power for heavy tasks and gaming. And as expected, in benchmarks, the X Flip posted numbers on par with the Moto and the Galaxy. What is much better here though is the thermal management, which has been historically not great in these sorts of flip phones. During our prolonged stress tests, the X Flip demonstrated decent stability, ramping its performance down gradually. A nice achievement for a small foldable. And another thing the X Flip has going for it is battery life. It has a 4400 mAh battery and earned a best-in-class endurance rating of 110 hours in our tests. The phone comes with a 44-watt charger in the box, and with it we were able to charge from 0 to 53% in half an hour. It's okay, nothing impressive. There is no wireless charging here like you get on the Razr or the Z Flip 4. Finally, let's talk about the cameras. The Z Flip has one of the best spec camera setups on a small foldable. There's a 50 megapixel main cam and a 12 megapixel ultra-wide which has autofocus. Photos from the main cam come out at 12.5 megapixels by default, and they're very good. They're highly detailed with a balanced rendition that's not overprocessed. There's no noise, and the dynamic range is excellent. The colors can come out a bit weird sometimes though, with the photo occasionally having warmish greens and whites having a greenish tinge. Enabling the Zeiss color mode will tone down those greens and the color saturation overall. In dark conditions, the X Flip applies night mode processing to its photos by default. The main camera captures excellent nighttime shots with plenty of detail. Vivo goes for a brighter look rather than a true-to-life one, with no dark shadows left behind. The skies are brightened up too. Highlights are well preserved and light sources reined in, and the colors are nicely saturated. You can take selfies with the main cam using the secondary screen as a viewfinder, and these shots are great, with a lot of detail and pleasing, lifelike skin tones. And unlike some other flip phones, these selfies can come out in 4:3 aspect ratio, not just 1:1. Let's compare that to the regular selfies from the 32 megapixel front-facing cam. These are actually quite good, with vibrant colors, wide dynamic range, and good detail. There's no autofocus here though, and the quality overall still isn't as good as the main cams. Let's go back to the main cam to talk about video quality. Its 4K videos are good, with enough detail, likable colors, and plenty of contrast. The white balance is a bit on the warmer side. In low light, the main camera can capture respectable videos, with good exposure and detail and wide dynamic range. The rear cameras support electronic stabilization in all resolutions and frame rates, and the EIS is great, ironing out shakiness from walking and enabling smooth pans. But for some reason, there's no EIS available for selfie videos, either from the selfie cam or the main cam. And on top of that, selfie videos are all limited to 1080p. Now let's talk about the ultra-wide cam. It doesn't disappoint, producing photos with a reasonable amount of detail. The dynamic range, contrast, and colors closely match those from the main cam. In low light, the ultra-wide produces good photos, with again some automatic night mode processing kicking in. You have well-preserved highlights and boosted shadows, and colors look great too. Look closely and there is some softness and noise, but it's no cause for alarm. 4K video from the ultrawide appears more contrasty than the main cams, with darker shadows. But like the main cam, colors come out a bit warm. The detail level is very good for an ultrawide in this class. So there you have it. Vivo has done a great job with their first clamshell foldable. The X Flip looks great, folds smoothly, and the crease is hardly noticeable. The cover screen is useful, and you get probably the best cameras on a flip phone yet. There are a few shortcomings though. You're missing stereo speakers and wireless charging, and you can't shoot 4K selfie videos with the rear cameras while the phone is folded. These are just a couple of kinks in a nice overall package though, and hopefully Vivo is able to iron them out by the time they release a global flip phone in the near future. Thanks for watching guys. If you're looking for alternatives to the Vivo X Flip, one option could be the Moto Razr 40 Ultra, or you could look into the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 4. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.